You're listening to WPRI 88.3 FM. This is HopePod Live. Next, we are going to be listening to our SJN Story of the Week. Communities of Hope is one of the 8 newsrooms in the country selected for Solutions Journalism Network's Student Media Challenge. We are investigating solutions for the mental health challenges of incarcerated youth and youth within the foster care system.
This week, we have stories from both of our SJN teams, and first up is our foster care team. This week, they talked about a solution called the Independent Living Program from Child and Family Rhode Island. The story also features an interview with psychologist Dr.Bonita Cade about the program and its effectiveness. Child and Family Rhode Island is one of the oldest and most trusted community organizations in the state, with roots dating back to 1866 when it began as the Home for Friendless Children. What started as a small home for the children without families has grown into a wide-reaching agency that supports more than 6,000 individuals every year, engaging with everyone from children to teens, families, to even older adults. Their mission is simple, but powerful: to strengthen families and communities by making sure everyone has the care and support that they need to thrive. Their guiding belief is that communities work best when we care for each other.
Among their many programs, one that stands out is the Independent Living Program, or the ILP. The ILP service is designed for teens and young adults ages 17 to 20 who are transitioning out of foster care. The ILP helps those young people learn how to live on their own safely, confidently, and successfully. Research from the National Youth in Transition Database, or NYTD, and different studies show that programs like this, especially those that provide continuous academic and financial support during ages 17 to 19, significantly lower the odds of homelessness and incarceration between ages 19 to 21. These findings highlight that stable, sustained services during this critical window of adolescence are key to positive outcomes. When youth age out of their foster care system, many face serious challenges. Without a stable home or strong support system, they are at risk of homelessness, unemployment, or struggling with mental health. The Independent Living Program works to step into that gap, offering both housing and hands-on guidance that is necessary to guide these individuals in the right direction. National data indicate that not all independent living services are equally effective. While life skills and home management training are extremely valuable, they are most effective when they are paired with ongoing financial and educational support. Programs that combine these elements, such as How ILP Does, align with best practices identified by Chapin Hall and the Urban Institute, which emphasize multi-domain support within education, employment, housing, health, and relationships.
Each participant in the ILP receives a safe apartment, all with rent and utilities covered, as well as weekly support from a dedicated life coach. These life coaches work closely with the young adults to set goals, plan for their futures, and build essential life skills like cooking, budgeting and finances, time management, and self-care. This design closely mirrors successful transitional housing models in other states. For example, California's Transitional Housing Placement Program and New York's Foster Youth Housing Initiative both combine rental assistance with intensive case management, which is an approach shown to improve housing stability and self-reported well-being. Similarly, Massachusetts' Housing Stability and Support Pilot provides short-term rental help and transitional planning, reducing immediate housing risks for youth exiting the foster care system. The goal of the program is not only to teach practical skills, but to help these youth build confidence and stability, as they transition into adulthood. By providing consistent emotional and educational support, the program ensures that young people are not navigating this transition by themselves. Evidence from across the state consistently supports this approach. Compared to other programs, ones like ILP that offer housing, individualized case management, as well as extended eligibility up to the age of at least 24. These show marginally better outcomes in comparison to short-term housing stability alongside lowering homelessness rates. Extending the ILP's age eligibility or partnering with federal voucher programs like the Department of Housing Development's Foster Youth to Independence initiatives could further help sustain these outcomes in Rhode Island.
Dr. Bonita Cade is a psychologist and lawyer who teaches psychology at Roger Williams University. She is particularly interested in how the legal system intersects with psychological concerns. Her current research focuses on looking at care and protection petitions, particularly looking at the characteristics of families in which these types of petitions are filed. We got to sit down with her this week and ask her about transition programs like the Independent Living Program.
When you look at outcomes for former foster youth, what distinguishes those who thrive emotionally from those who struggle? And how do transition programs like this make that difference? Or if you think...
Okay, that's a very good question. First of all, perhaps it doesn't need to be said, but maybe it does. If someone is in the foster care system, something has gone very wrong. And whatever has gone wrong, the one thing that is absolutely true is it is not the fault of the child. And I say that because kids who come through that system often feel something is wrong with me. I'm not lovable. I did something. And they carry that in the core of them. So one of the things that it sounds like the program that you're talking about does is it's going to give kids an opportunity to begin to deal with that concept. Because people who don't feel that they are valued often act in ways that put themselves in jeopardy and danger. Okay? They don't do it on purpose, but they don't feel good about themselves. Okay? So that's one thing. The other thing is, remember, foster care by its nature is probably going to involve one or more homes. And no matter how good, and there's some really good foster parents out there, the kind of stability you get in a home that doesn't involve temporary parents or parents for 3 or 4 years, etc., is not there. And the stability that, again, young people need in order to launch the sense of self, the sense of the world, they don't necessarily have that at the same levels that other kids might, or at the level that they need, because the world, quite frankly, hasn't been a trustworthy place. So again, sometimes people act out or don't read signals correctly. So the transition is crucial because basically what you're doing is purposely giving skills that perhaps other kids get sort of automatically and nobody thinks about it because of the things that they've involved with. They've probably had a job. They've probably been part of a youth group. They've probably gone to camp. They've done all sorts of little things along the way. And they've also probably gotten very good attention from the educational system. Often kids in foster care do not. They just, and again, people don't mean to mistreat or not pay attention to people on purpose, but they do. So having a transition program that purposely teaches skills, and one of those skills is how to read people, how to go about getting a job, things that other kids may take for granted, or have parents mentoring them, at every level of their development. These kids aren't likely to have that. So again, any kind of transition that purposely is saying, these are the skills that you need, it is giving them a much better start and more of a fair chance, as long as it's also sort of addressing some of those psychological needs and paying attention, because they can also give kids feedback in terms of this is what you did, and this probably isn't going to play really well for a future employer, and this is why. Not because you're a bad person, but this is the way outsiders read this. Again, nobody taught them that along the way, or it is inconsistent teaching. So I think any kind of transition is fantastic. And I really like the age range of 17 to 21, because it takes us a while to get our, sea legs, if you will. And I think, sometimes we cut off programs much too soon, So I think that's a really good idea to keep it going into that very, very young adult place.
As Dr. Cade highlighted, these programs are extremely beneficial to the youth to keep them on track. Entering into the real world or society is hard enough, let alone without the support that individuals in the foster care system need. Programs such as the ILP provide this kind of support. More specifically, in Rhode Island, where housing costs are high and affordable homes can be hard to find, programs like ILP play a vital role. Many families face systematic barriers in housing. These challenges often contribute to children entering foster care in the first place. The Independent Living Program helps to break that cycle by offering young people stable housing and the tools to maintain it, ensuring that they can build strong, more independent futures for themselves and their families. Ongoing evaluation and data collection, such as tracking participants' housing, education, and employment outcomes at 6, 12, and 24-month intervals, would align ILP with the NYTD framework and fill current evidence gaps on long-term success. Collecting and publishing this data could also help benchmark Rhode Island's outcomes against national trends and guide future improvements.
Each year, Child and Family Rhode Island continues to expand its reach with over 700 staff members working between Providence and Middleton. Their work demonstrates that when communities invest in their youth and families, they build a foundation for long-term success and stability. Other states' experiences also show that scale and sustained funding matter. So, larger, well-supported programs like California's THP Plus have stabilized thousands after thousands of youth. Expanding ILP capacity could replicate these benefits locally, alongside supporting more young adults who are aging out of care. Ultimately, the independent living program represents hope, showing that with the right support, guidance, and opportunities, young people leaving foster care can not only survive on their own, but truly thrive in society. As the broader research highlights and emphasizes, combining housing with financial, educational, and relational supports and ensuring continuity of care into early adulthood is what most effectively protects youth transitioning from foster care from homelessness, instability, incarceration. ILP embodies this evidence-based model and continues to strengthen the safety net for Rhode Island's young individuals.
All right. Thank you for our SJN foster care segment of the week. Thank you to our amazing team who always does a great job. You're listening to WQRI 88.3 FM, and this is Hope Pod Live. Next, we're going to be hearing from our SJN Juvenile Justice team. This past week, they spoke with Mario Monterio, co-founder of the Rhode Island Freedom Collective, and the namesake of Mario's Law. In our conversation, we covered the conditions of the current juvenile system and the flaws surrounding how tools are not provided to individuals placed in the system at a young age to uphold rehabilitation. Additionally, they discussed the purpose of impact of the law. Here is that story now.
Mario's Law is about second chances, says Mario Monterio, namesake of the law, and someone who knows firsthand what it means to be given a second chance. Mario was just 17 years old when he was waived from the juvenile system and criminally charged as an adult. He spent about 3 months in the juvenile system before being sent to the adult one. After being waived, he was placed in segregation until his 18th birthday. Segregation, though intended for his protection, meant that Monteiro spent 23 hours a day alone in a cell. The purpose was to physically separate him from the other prisoners for his own safety, given that he was still a minor at the time. However, regardless of the intentions, all of this time in segregation can take a harsh toll on someone's mind, let alone a young person who is still developing in many ways. When Mario talks about those years now, he does so with reflection and purpose. He shares that it was during this time where he began to understand not only what accountability meant, but what change could look like. During his time in maximum security prison, Mario began to educate himself by reading about the law, learning about advocacy work, and studying the systems that had shaped his own life. Over time, his curiosity became a passion for reform. Mario co-founded the Rhode Island Freedom Collective alongside Stephen Parkhurst and Kyle Campbell. We recently spoke with the Freedom Collective about mental health within the juvenile justice system, and it's easy to see how our conversations with them overlap with Mario's work and his story. The Freedom Collective explains Mario's work for the grassroots organization best, saying, "As Director of Legislative Affairs, Mario serves as the primary point of contact between the organization and government entities. His role is centered on advocating for policies that align with our mission by building relationships with lawmakers, tracking legislative developments, and ensuring our interests are represented in the legislative process. His advocacy includes lobbying efforts, policy analysis, and coalition building to influence policy decisions that promote justice reform." During our recent conversation with Mario and his friend Christopher, who is currently incarcerated, we talked about what life inside is really like. They both described a prison environment that fails to support growth or healing. Commissary food is mostly junk food, and the meals served are rarely nutritious. Mario reflected that, while this might seem like a small detail, the lack of healthy food has real consequences for mental health. Many studies have shown that nutrition impacts well-being, focus, and resilience. According to Veteran Affairs, studies have found that a highly processed diet can put us at a higher risk of developing anxiety or depression. A highly processed diet includes foods that are high in sugar, fat, and sodium, and are low in produce, whole grains, and other healthy whole foods. Inside the system, however, people are left with diets that fuel stress, depression, and a lack of energy. The mental health was a problem, Mario told us. I did not fully understand what trauma was until I was 36, he reflected. Mario explained that many who end up in prison carry trauma from childhood. Violence, loss, neglect, that was never addressed. When those wounds go untreated, they grow. The system, instead of helping, tends to deepen these wounds. The mental health care in Max is non-existent, Mario said. There is no trust with the mental health personnel, he added. Chris echoed the sentiment. The system does not provide us with the tools or resources to address the trauma, he said. So what happens is the system begins to compound pre-existing trauma. Chris's words highlight a cycle that affects so many who are incarcerated. Unhealed pain from early life collides with the harsh conditions of prison, creating more damage rather than repair. Trauma is real, no matter where you grew up, Mario said. And it's clear that he knows that truth from his own lived experience. It was in that environment of isolation and violence and neglect that Mario's drive to advocate for change began to take root. He saw the people around him struggling, breaking down, and giving up. He saw men and women being mistreated by guards, dismissed by medical staff, and forgotten by a system that claimed to be about rehabilitation, but rarely offered the tools to achieve it. He decided he wanted to be part of the change. I wanted to help the women and men be better versions of themselves when they got home, he said, because we all deserve a shot at that. That belief in second chances later became the foundation of what would be called Mario's Law. Mario's Law, officially enacted in July of 2021, is legislation that is designed to give people who committed crimes as youth or young adults a second look after a significant period of time. The law states that anyone who committed an offense before their 22nd birthday, except for those serving life without parole, is eligible for parole review after serving 20 years. Importantly, the law applies retroactively to offenses committed on or after January 1st of 1991. For Mario, the creation of this law was both personal and symbolic. He had been sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms for crimes committed at age 17. After serving more than 20 years, the parole board voted unanimously to release him, but his release was delayed due to technicalities in how the Department of Corrections interpreted consecutive life sentences. This experience, being forced into years of waiting for a second chance he had already earned, solidified his belief that the system needed to change. We asked Mario what kind of systemic problem Mario's Law sought to address.
I think it's factual. The majority of people incarcerated come from, mostly poor communities.
Right.
Communities that have, a higher percentage of racialized people, Black, Hispanic, Asian. So I think these communities also, like we've been talking about, have dealt with a lot of trauma. A lot of kids in these communities have been through a lot. And like, Chris had mentioned, to escape that trauma, the trauma of not having a father or whatever, or growing up in an abusive household, they go and join a gang and make decisions that sometimes take people's lives, like I had done. And, we know, I'm sure trauma, any child who experiences trauma growing up, like it just impacts the development of so many areas in their brain. And even kids, specifically men, don't fully develop in certain regions of their brain until they're in their mid-20s. Things like judgment, long-term consequences, we don't develop that. I definitely didn't have that at 17. And so what does Mario's Law address? It addresses that. And that's what the Supreme Court did back in 2008 with Roper versus Simmons,
Right.
And Graham versus Florida, and Montgomery versus Louisiana. Every case that the Supreme Court decided, spoke about children experiencing trauma. Doctors spoke about that. And that's what these laws were addressing. That's, Massachusetts was one of the first states after the Supreme Court made the decision to change their sentencing laws for juvenile offenders.
Right.
And that's what Rhode Island did. It speaks to that children should not be locked up for the rest of their life. Children deserve a second chance. Children, if they have to serve that same sentence that a full-grown adult would end up spending more time in prison than that adult. So Mario's law speaks to second chances. Kids have the ability to redeem themselves if given the opportunity, and that's what we have done. That's what I did, and the 6-7 people who've been released so far have all done.
Mario's reflections on the purpose of the law make it abundantly clear that the law works to allow for second chances, to allow people for a chance at redemption. That belief in second chances would soon find a powerful ally in the Rhode Island State House. Representative Julie Casimiro really took this bill over the finish line, Mario said, acknowledging Casimiro's key role in bringing the legislation to life. She represents District 31 in the Rhode Island House of Representatives and serves on the House Judiciary Committee. Mario met her at his graduation ceremony for a gang step-down program, and from there, the two began to work on the bill. There were many compromises along the way. The original bill proposed banning life without parole and offering parole eligibility after 15 years. The final version reflects a longer timeline and a more limited scope, but for Mario, it was still progress. It's about hope, he said, about recognizing that people grow and that we're not the same as we were when we were kids. At its core, Mario's law seeks to address the reality that young people's brains are still developing well into their 20s. Research in neuroscience and psychology shows that decision-making, impulse control, and judgment continue to mature during these years. The law acknowledges that immaturity, impulsivity, and vulnerability to peer pressure are mitigating factors in juvenile and young adult crime, and that with time, guidance, and opportunity, rehabilitation is not only possible, but it's extremely likely. In our conversation, Mario captured this truth powerfully. He explained why this law matters, saying, the majority of adolescents incarcerated generally come from poor communities that have a high percentage of people of color. They've dealt with a lot of trauma. So to escape that trauma, they join a gang and make decisions that take lives. In this discussion surrounding the importance of this law, Mario also highlights the science behind why it's important, saying, anyone who experiences such trauma growing up impacts the development of so many aspects of their brain. While the mistakes made in youth can have devastating and far-reaching consequences for victims, the families of victims, and communities, it's essential to remember that young people often act without full consequential awareness. Alongside this, neuroscience shows that the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that's responsible for impulse control, judgment, and long-term decision-making, does not fully develop until around age 25, particularly in males. Mario's law addresses that. It speaks to how children should not be locked up for the rest of their lives. Children deserve a second chance, Mario says. His words sum up the spirit of the law perfectly. A recognition that redemption must be possible if rehabilitation is real, and a question of how one can exist without the other. Chris added another layer to the idea of second chances later in the conversation. In his own personal experience, he explains why the law itself is so important to adolescents. A lot of the individuals who are now home due to Mario's law, they never got to do so many adolescent milestones. They missed all of that, Chris said. So now, Mario's law gave them a chance to go home and to essentially be that teenager in a grown person's body. Chris's words capture something that cannot be measured in legislation alone. The quiet shift that happens when someone begins to see a future beyond the prison walls. Mario's law gives people a reason to change, a reason to try, a newfound feeling of hope. The impact of the law, though still unfolding, is already being felt across Rhode Island. Over the next 10 to 15 years, the law is expected to affect around 40 individuals in the state. People who, like Mario, were sentenced to extreme terms for crimes committed during their youth. Some have already seen their lives transformed by the opportunity the law provides. Mario shared the stories of two men who, before this law, would have died in prison for acts committed at age 17. Both were released with parole under Mario's law, and both are now rebuilding their lives. One has graduated from a job training program, the other has bought a car, another is working a full-time job and reconnecting with his family. There's a lot more in Mario's. It could have been named their law also, Mario said when describing these individuals. These are small but incredibly profound victories, proof that rehabilitation and reintegration are not just ideals but achievable realities. Beyond the numbers, Mario's law has also inspired broader conversation about justice, mental health, and the purpose of incarceration. It challenges the idea that systemic punishment alone can lead to a sense of security or progress towards healing. Instead, it centers humanity and growth. It asks whether a system that cages teenagers for decades without offering true support is really serving its community. And it provides a framework for hope, not just for those inside, but for families and communities on the outside who believe in redemption. Mario's own journey reflects the law's intent. During his years behind bars, he evolved from a struggling teenager to a thoughtful advocate, a scholar, and a mentor. He founded initiatives aimed at supporting incarcerated peoples and worked to create the Rhode Island Freedom Collective after his release, a group that is dedicated to reform, education, and empowerment. Mario's life is now a testament to what can happen when someone is given the chance to prove that they've changed. In Rhode Island, where incarceration rates and housing instability intersect with deep systemic inequities, Mario's law represents more than legal reform, and it's more of a social and moral reform. It asks us to rethink what justice should look like for young people whose worst mistakes happened before they were fully developed. It acknowledges that trauma, poverty, and lack of opportunity play a powerful role in shaping choice, and that true rehabilitation requires addressing those root causes, not ignoring them. Each story that comes out of this law, the men and women who walk free after decades inside, the families reunited, the lives rebuilt, adds weight to Mario's belief that communities are stronger when they invest in second chances. Mario's advocacy continues to ripple outward, inspiring both those still incarcerated and those fighting for reform and justice. When Mario speaks about the law, his voice carries both gratitude and urgency. It's about making sure no kid goes through what I went through without knowing there's hope, he says. Because once you give someone hope, they start to change everything about how they live. Mario's law is, at its heart, a story of redemption. It proves that with the right support, guidance, and opportunity, young people who have made serious mistakes can not only survive their pasts, but truly thrive beyond them. It's a reminder that justice doesn't have to mean giving up on people. It can mean believing in who they can become. And through Mario's story, we see that second chances aren't just about freedom, but also about possibility, healing, and the belief that no one is beyond transformation.
All right, you are listening to 88.3 FM, and this is Hope Pod Live. Thank you to our SJN teams. Both of you did amazing this week. And last week, we previewed our story about the Barbershop Club's fashion show, and today we have that full recorded story courtesy of reporters Addison Mason and Joshua Gahegan. So let's take a listen to that story now.
On November 1st, Roger Williams University's Barbershop Club hosted its 5th annual fashion show with the help of multiple campus affinity groups. Combining the members of the Multicultural Student Union, the Asian American Alliance, the Hispanic and Latinx Student Association, Women of Color Club, Global Hawks, and Barbershop, the fashion show attempted to showcase the vast varieties of multicultural elements and Black excellence on the Roger Williams campus. The theme of this year's show was Paradox, with each round highlighting different polar opposite styles of dress. From rural to urban and minimalist to maximalist, this theme allowed the student models to shine with their own creativity and storytelling. I know when I heard it, I was very nervous about it, but seeing how unique people dressed with the different rounds really shows that you can do anything with creativity. Sophomore and fashion show model Dorothy Riley explained. This year, instead of highlighting different eras or particular styles of fashion, the affinity groups instead chose to lean into the conceptual storytelling elements of fashion. This decision was initially viewed as a challenge, but as models found ways of uniquely attempting to fit parameters of each round, they realized how freeing the new theme was. This fashion show was different from what we were typically used to, and I honestly love that message and embracing that made to fit one standard or anything, shared model Natasha Alvarez. The fashion show also featured performances from Providence cover dance troupe Okaze and URI dance group Exposure. Alyssa Sin, a dancer from Okaze, said that it took 3 weeks to choreograph the dance. We learned it by ourselves and we cleaned it up all together, she explained. The show also offered a round of tight-fitting versus loose. Models walked side by side representing the two sides as a comparison. The show ended with the culture round. Models showcased different dances and outfits to represent their own culture. The represented areas and cultures included were Greece, Cote d'Ivoire, Guatemala, the Philippines, African American, Grenada, Jamaica, Mexico, Dominican Republic, Haiti, and Puerto Rico. Shannon Chilel said her favorite round of the fashion show was the culture round. She said that she really enjoys representing her Guatemalan culture. Chilel views this as a way to get out of her shell. She shares, "I think it was a great opportunity for me to get involved on campus and get that extrovert part of me out because I'm very introverted, and a great way to make friends, connections, show my culture, and just enjoy it." The show was also well enjoyed by the people in attendance. Fiona Connolly, an RWU student in attendance, said, "I think it's been awesome to see so many people get together and have amazing clothes and just have a great time."
All right. Thank you to Joshua and Addison for our fashion show story of the week. Check out our website for more on the Barbershop Club fashion show. And now, before we take a break and welcome in our next host, Alana, here's some more news. Federal judge rules against Rhode Island doctors' challenge to deportation. Reporter Jocelyn Flower investigated the case of Dr. Rasha Alaway, a Rhode Island kidney specialist who was deported earlier this year despite holding a valid H-1B visa sponsored by Brown University. After returning from Lebanon in March, Alawaya was detained at Boston Logan International Airport when Customs and Border Protection agents questioned her about photos and links on her phone related to Hezbollah and Iranian leadership. She was then deemed inadmissible and deported, prompting widespread concern among colleagues and immigrant rights advocates in Rhode Island. Flowers' reporting shows how Alawaya filed a federal petition challenging her removal, arguing that her deportation violated constitutional protections and due process. However, U.S. Judge Leo Sorokin dismissed the case, ruling that the court had, quote, no authority to undo the deportation since Alawaya was no longer in custody. The decision effectively leaves her barred from returning to the United States for 5 years under an expedited removal order. The case underscores ongoing tensions between national security enforcement and immigration due process, especially for foreign medical professionals contributing to U.S. healthcare institutions. As Alawaya remained abroad, her supporters continue to call for accountability and procedural reform in the handling of visa holders. More of this at WPRI.com.
Federal judge orders Homeland Security to comply with disaster aid ruling. Reporter Christopher Shea examined a new legal confrontation between the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and a coalition of 20 Democratic-led states after a Rhode Island federal judge ruled that the Trump administration had violated a prior court order. U.S. District Judge William E. Smith found that federal officials continued to attach immigration-related conditions to FEMA disaster relief grants, despite his earlier decision to strike down the policy as unconstitutional. Smith's order, issued Tuesday, gives Homeland Security 7 days to remove the contested condition and comply fully with the court's directive. Shea's reporting highlights how the dispute stems from a 2023 FEMA directive that sought to withhold disaster aid from states refusing to enforce Trump's immigration agenda. Judge Smith previously condemned the directive as a ham-handed attempt to bully the states into compliance, emphasizing that federal disaster relief cannot be used as leverage for immigration enforcement. Attorneys general from Rhode Island, Illinois, and 18 other states accused the administration of ignoring the September ruling by reissuing FEMA grant letters containing the same contested language. The ruling marks another flashpoint in the ongoing battle between state government and federal immigration policy, testing the limits of executive power over federal funding. Rhode Island Attorney General Peter Naroa praised the court's decision as a victory for constitutional balance and state autonomy, vowing continued resistance to what he described as blatant overreach by the Trump administration. More of this at rhodeislandcurrent.com.
Providence moves to ban police cooperation with ICE. Reporter David DeMattis detailed how Providence Mayor Brett Smiley signed an executive order titled A Secure Providence for All, prohibiting city officers from cooperating with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The order, announced Monday, aims to strengthen trust between immigrant communities and local authorities following months of tension over alleged police involvement in federal immigration operations. The policy comes after a July incident in which Providence officers were accused of assisting ICE during an immigrant's detention allegations that police officer Oscar Perez denied. Under the directive, officers are barred from concealing their identities, must wear body cameras, and are required to display full identification while on duty. Perez says that the order reinforces existing practices within the department, emphasizing transparency and accountability. Lieutenant Governor Sabina Matos praised the measure as a reaffirmation of Providence's commitment to community safety and inclusion, stating that local police, quote, are not acting as immigration and customs enforcement agents. City officials reiterated their support for organizations offering immigrant services and urged Congress to protect temporary protected status for migrants. More of this at nbcboston.com. Providence City Council advances measure limiting police cooperation with ICE. Reporter Christopher Shea covered the Providence City Council's unanimous first approval of amendments to the city's Community Police Relations Act, aimed at further restricting local police interactions with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The proposal seeks to strengthen protections for immigrant residents amid renewed federal enforcement efforts under the Trump administration. The update ordinance would bar Providence police from assisting ICE without criminal warrant signed by a judge and designate schools, churches, courts, and health facilities as safe spaces for immigrant actions. Councilor Miguel Sanchez called the measure of reflection of Providence's values as a, quote, welcoming city where every neighbor deserves to feel safe. The measure now heads to a second vote on November 6th before reaching Mayor Brett Smiley's desk, who has expressed support for revisions as a balance between protecting immigrant communities and limiting city liability. More of this at rhodeislandcurrent.com. All right, as we take a break and head into our second hour and wait for Alana, we're going to put on some quick tunes for you, and we'll be back shortly. All right, welcome back. You are listening to 88.3 FM, WQRI, Roger Williams University Student Radio in Bristol, Rhode Island, and this is Hope Pod Live with your weekly news. We have now welcomed in our other host, Alana. So, Alana, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for introducing me. For our next segment, we will be hearing from our Queer on Campus team and their most recent story. But first, here is another quick PSA and then some news.
Hello, and welcome back. Here are some more stories that are making headlines across Rhode Island. From ice in Warren to new candidates in Rhode Island governor race, Rhode Island elementary school grants, and Rhode Island cold cases finally solved, here's Alexa with those stories.
Ice in Warren incites protest. Protesters gathered in Warren on Tuesday morning after seeing ice in the area. Around 50 protesters were present until the afternoon. We heard that ICE was present on Water Street today in the general vicinity of our plant. We did not have any communication with ICE agents and they did not enter our building. We're monitoring the station and situation as you are. Our employees are a top priority to assist us at Blount, said a Blount's Fine Food spokesperson. Police responded to assist with traffic control and peacekeeping only. The new candidate in the Rhode Island governor race. New entrant Greg Stevens is a Rhode Island business owner in the Democratic primary race for governor. I'm not running as a politician, he said. I'm running as someone who's lived on the front lines. As a small business owner, I've spent my life creating jobs, paying taxes, and helping Rhode Islanders put food on their tables. More of this story from Go Local Proud. ICE detained man, state rep declares outrage. ICE conducted enforcement in Warren and detained one undocumented man, pulling him from his vehicle during the operation. I am outraged about what happened today on Veterans Day in Warren, a community that I represent. ICE showed up on Water Street. They spent only hours inside their unmarked cars outside of Blount Seafood, which, as I understand, only employs people with valid work permits. ICE agents swooped in and pulled a man from his car and took him away. These tactics don't do anything to meaningfully improve public safety, but they scare the hell out of the community and are inhumane and un-American. Rhode Island elementary schools receive huge grant for recycling cafeteria food waste. Rhode Island School Recycling Project received $750,000 in grants to help every elementary school launch a student-led food waste recycling program. Thousands of elementary school students will be able to play crucial roles in extending the life of the central landfill and significantly reducing their school's carbon footprint. And the best part, it's being done by students with help from great custodians, cafeteria staff, and teachers, said RISRP co-director Jim Corwin. This project aims to extend the life of the state's only landfill by cafeteria food waste into other environmentally friendly uses. 2 decades-old homicide cases closed. Rhode Island Attorney General Office's Cold Case Unit closed their first 2 cases using DNA technology and a modern understanding of polygraph tests. The 2000 death of 49-year-old Cynthia McKenna and the 1984 murder of 24-year-old Deborah Stone. These findings won't lead to any charges as the suspect of these murders died several years ago. More of this from the Brown Daily Herald.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week with more news across Rhode Island.
All right. Thank you to our news team. Now we're going to move on to our Queer on Campus story. And we just want to preface with a quick trigger warning. The story deals with some heavy topics like self-harm and suicide. So please reach out to trusted individuals and take care of yourself during this time. This week, our Queer on Campus team talked about Transgender Day of Remembrance. Reporter Brenna Madeira spoke with Ron Richard and his wife Sandra of PFLAG Providence about this special day. Per their website, quote, PFLAG, formerly known as Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, is a nonprofit national support, education, and advocacy organization for lesbians, gay, bisexual, transgender, and genderqueer or nonconforming people, their families, friends, and allies. Here's that story now. Transgender Day of Remembrance was created as a memorial for all transgender people lost to any kind of violence. It was created in 1999 by transgender advocate Gwendolyn Ann Smith. The vigil is annually observed on November 20th and is founded to honor the memory of Rita Hester and Chanel Pickett. The pair were transgender women murdered in November of 1995 and 1998, respectively. Hester's murder was never solved. The day was not recognized globally until 2010. Transgender Day of Remembrance is for all of the members of the transgender community who have lost their lives to violence. It's a reminder of the violence that transgender people and other people in the LGBTQ plus community face. With this Day of Memoriam happening next Thursday, November 20th, people may be wondering how they can get involved to remember the queer lives of those lost to violence.
First things first, spread the word about the day to bring more recognition to it. While the day is recognized globally, there are not many vigils and events that happen to bring awareness to LGBTQ plus violence. Next, attend or organize a vigil. While there are not many vigils that occur, there are still some. Check for local churches and organizations that are hosting vigils in your community. Just going to show your support for the queer community is a large step towards peace. Finally, plan for next year. While plenty of yearly queer events happen at times like Pride, it is important that other queer days of remembrance are shown similar love and attention. Help where you can by helping to plan vigils or events with local communities. Also spread the word. The more people who know about the events and vigils are happening, the more people go, and the more organizations will want to host them.
To learn more about what Transgender Day of Remembrance means to our local community, Queer on Campus reporter Brenna Madeira spoke to Ron and Sandra Richard from the PFLAG Providence organization. Here's that interview now.
Thank you guys so much for again coming to sit down and talk with me. So my first question for you guys is, what does Transgender Day of Remembrance mean to you and your organization?
Well, it's an opportunity to recognize the passing of a number of trans individuals that otherwise would not be recognized, and they're leaving us in a very tragic way in most instances. Unfortunately, this kind of repeats itself year in and year out. The other thing that has significance for us personally is that we joined PFLAG when our daughter came out as trans back in 2009. So, she's doing very well, but we do have a kind of an extra vested interest in the trans community and a lot at stake, and recognizing how dangerous it is for trans and people to be out in the general public. It's something that we need to do on a yearly basis. Unfortunately, it's just an ongoing process, and it looks like it's not going to go away anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. Right. And looking towards the community aspect, because you guys have that vested interest, how do you see Transgender Day of Remembrance sort of affecting LGBTQ groups, especially in the community?
I wish it was recognized in a greater degree. Mm-hmm. We do a lot of celebrations during Pride Month and so forth. This is a significant event within the LGBTQ community in terms of remembering people that have passed, and to me, it just doesn't get enough publication. There's an event on Saturday in Providence, and we're doing something at our church, and you're doing something, but I don't see it as a collective outcry by the community in terms of what goes on within the trans community every year. The other tragic thing is that many of these people that pass that may have been murdered, they're victims, but they're never going to. Whoever did this to them really is probably not going to be caught. There's not a lot of apprehensions and convictions within the community as far as that's concerned, and that's tragic in itself.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And then there's, a number of people took their own lives, and some of them very young people. And that's just tragic in and of itself, just because of bullying or just not being able to fully live their authentic lives. And for whatever reason, that was their solution. They just couldn't live with themselves anymore, and that really needs to be emphasized.
Yeah, of course, and I fully agree with you. It's tragic that especially a day like that isn't recognized more widespread because it's considered a stigma, which I fully disagree with.
And there are people who probably have passed that we're not aware of, unreported incidents of either suicides or other murders that just, you don't hear about.
Yeah. The other problem you have in terms of, I hate to use the word celebrating this because it's probably the wrong term.
Memorializing.
Thank you, yes. Is that a lot of people that would like to attend these services won't come out because they don't want to be they still remain in the shadows because of the circumstances of what we're dealing with in today's environment. So to put themselves out there would create a situation where they're in feeling that they're in danger.
Right.
So they'll stay away from these type of events, even though they sympathize and or support them. They won't attend.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about these memorials, what resources are available in the community for support during these times, and how can people access these resources?
There's the TGI network, which provides support to the trans community and the non-binary community. They have support meetings. People come to PFLAG for support, where we provide support to anybody. I mean, it started out being originally mainly parents of LGBTQ people, but we get, members of the LGBTQ community themselves who come looking for support, whether it's they're having difficulty coming out to family, or they're having even difficulty understanding themselves and trying to figure out, how and where and when they want to come out to people. So there's that group. There are other type of, LGBTQ type social groups, but in terms of general support, I think those are mainly the ones, along with Youth Pride if you're a younger person. If you're housing insecure, there's House of Kodak, which can offer, if they're not full, some temporary housing options for young trans people. I think there's an age limit who can go there. So there's those organizations. Unfortunately, they're really few and far between, considering the number of people that are out there and find themselves sometimes out on the street or can't get the kind of support that they need, or they're either housing insecure, they don't have the transportation to get where they need to go. There are LGBT groups in Newport Out, which may have some resources or assistance. The other options are online forums for members of the trans community as well as general LGBTQ community. There are a number of different private Facebook groups that people can join, but the only issue with some of those is how good is the support and offered from the community. And with PFLAG and probably TGI Network and Youth Pride, you've got credibility and solid information. You've got the health services. You've got Thunder Mist and Open Door Health. You've got Hasbro, Children's Hospital that offers trans health care. So they're all vetted, credible organizations that can help members of the community. I think sometimes what does happen is there's a group of the 20-something, like the college age students, who fall between the cracks in terms of getting the support. You've got Youth Pride. They can come to PFLAG for sure, but we've heard from people who are looking for even just some either support or social connections that they can't find. They don't know where to look. There's an older group for Pride and Aging. If you're a senior, a senior citizen, where you can get support and community as well. So, you just really have to search for it.
Yeah. One of the things that comes up every spring, but we have the Trans Health Conference.
Right.
That's really good. Takes place at Rhode Island College. Generally, right at the end of May, before Pride. Pride, and so that's been going on annually, and that's been a very good event from an educational standpoint and support. So but that's that's one day affair, and then that's the problem. The other challenging thing is terms of all of these organizations are volunteer led, and sometimes there's not enough volunteers. Mm-hmm. And there's been instances where organizations have had to suspend their services because there has been nobody there to, carry on, after somebody leaves. And that becomes extremely challenging.
Right. And what can groups, organizations, allies, what can just humans do to sort of memorialize the Trans Day of Remembrance and remember the people we've lost?
Well, besides attending, but keeping it to the forefront, and in terms of supporting, the trans community on an everyday basis, because there's a lot of things said about the trans community recently. I mean, the last election, they were like the tip of the spear in terms of wokeness was, oh my gosh, it was the trans, everything was the trans community, it was everybody, it was, it was like the country's problems was because of the trans community almost. And, we need to speak out about something like that. All right. And when the opportunity comes, it's easy. People feel comfortable in terms of trashing the trans community right now. Right? And so we need to take an opportunity when that happens to speak up in favor of them and not be afraid to make a statement contrary to what was just maybe said to you in a group setting, right?
We need to tell their stories or tell our stories, just how that effort worked in helping marriage equality come to fruition and get passed. People need to really, get rid of the lies and the misinformation about what it means to be trans and tell the stories of real people and who they are and what they've gone through. All these men and women and non-binary people who died had lives, and some of them were very prominent in the social justice movement and things like that. And they're not just a number or a name. They were somebody's daughter, they might have been somebody's spouse or brother or sister or whatever. Their lives mattered, and we need to let people know that they mattered, and we just need to educate people on the truth about gender identity, that it's not a binary, and that it's always been there. It's not like a made up thing. It's not something new, something that's just woke. It's existed since time immemorial, and people need to get that and understand it.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. Is there anything else you guys want to add, maybe that I didn't touch on that you want to touch on?
I think if we could get more people to hold these events and recognize, we've got the one in Providence, and there are some other churches that are all welcoming that will have a type of event. There's one in Newport our church is going to do something. We're a Catholic church, so we're going to do it during our Mass. But we need to have more events that bring to the forefront that this is wrong. These people, just because they were trans, was why they were murdered or why they took their lives. And why? It's totally senseless. Totally senseless.
The thing is, for example, you're doing this year. Now, is this your first year that you're doing this?
We did a story on this last year as well. I try to do one every year.
So that's good.
So that's the point. That's good. And what we need to do is kind of try to expand upon that. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've seen a lot of communities with pride events throughout the month of June. And it started primarily because of COVID, and when the Providence didn't have their big event, communities decided to take it upon themselves to do something. So it's a case of trying to get the word out that this is an important day. And I guess we, as supporters of the trans community, maybe need to advertise this more. We need to make sure people understand that this is a special day and it comes up every year. This time, and it should be it should be these people should be honored and remembered. And I think if we build on that, more people will get involved. All right. So it's sometimes it's baby steps, but it's a commitment to do it year after year after year. Right, and then it gets the word out more.
Yeah.
So thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're very welcome. I really love trying to spread awareness for things that people may not think about. So my whole purpose as a journalist is what I want to do, is what I want to do after I graduate. People need to hear about certain things. Let's talk about it. I don't care if there's a stigma around it. We need to talk about it.
The biggest thing on this, what Sandy was saying, is that these people had. They're special. I mean, they had lives that were taken from them. I should say their lives were taken from them. They're just not a number and a name, but so, and then like I said, with our daughter, we've got a vested interest in this because of circumstances. I mean, she's living a very successful life, but when you see what happens to the trans community, there's always that in the back of our minds, and and it's something that shouldn't be happening. And the only way to combat, in a sense, is to make people aware that it's taking place. Right? So, thank you for what you do.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much again to Ron and Sandra for sitting down with Brenna to talk about this really, really important day and telling us more about their story.
If you're looking for more information on LGBTQ plus related issues or other podcasts or stories, make sure to check out our website at communitydrivennews.org and look for Queer on Campus. Additionally, now through November 19th, the RWU orgs Q-Track and Saga are holding dedicated time to increase understanding of the challenges faced by transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary people, and to honor their contributions to society and culture. On campus, Saga and Q-Track are holding events in honor of Trans Awareness Week and Transgender Day of Remembrance for November 17th through 20th. And the details of those events can be found on our Instagram pages at RWU_Q-Track, that's QTRAC, and RWU Saga, that's SAGA. Thanks for tuning in this week to Queer on Campus. And before we move on to our next story, here are some quick promos.
There's a new campus publication out now in collaboration with the Society of Professional Journalists, aka SPJ, and Communities of Hope, titled The Capsized Tribune. We write on a variety of topics, from campus updates to investigative pieces. There's always something going on. Check out our Instagram at Capsized Tribune, or check out our website at capsize.rw.me for some of our most recent stories.
The Hawks Herald is Rogers' news outlet with their latest edition of the paper in newsstands around campus. Stay tuned for the next edition of the paper coming to you on December 4th. You can also check them out online at thehawksherald.com or follow them on Instagram at thehawksherald. Communities of Hope is excited to announce the upcoming launch of our new website chatbot. The chatbot is designed to support incarcerated individuals and youth in the foster care system. The chatbot will provide a safe space for users to ask questions about their mental health and life after release. There will be a special preview on how to use the chatbot, which will air on Friday, December 5th. Stay tuned.
Roger Williams University History Department invites you to Recovering Thomas, From Slavery to Freedom on the Sea, which is a special exhibit and lecture uncovering the remarkable story of Thomas White, a 15-year-old who escaped slavery, found freedom through a network of abolitionists, and sailed the world as a ship's cook.
Join Dr. Charlotte Carrington Farmer, RWU alum and author Cynthia Elder, and RWU history major Rachel Cabral as they discuss their groundbreaking research recently featured in Smithsonian Magazine and the ongoing work by RWU students to trace White's extraordinary life and legacy. The exhibit opens at 4:30, followed by the lecture at 5:00 p.m. on November 17th, 2025, at the Mary Tuft White Center in the RWU Library. This month, the Campus Democrats is putting together a food drive that is running till November 18th for the Roger Williams Annual Thanksgiving Food Drive, and it will be donated to East Bay Food Pantry. Please bring all non-perishable foods, such as canned goods and non-food items like gift cards, toys, and Tupperware to the Poli-Sci Pod located in CAS 112 to 119. The Roger Williams Faculty Senate is encouraging faculty to donate to the Student Emergency Fund. If you are capable of donating, please reach out to us at Communities of Hope, and we can direct you to who to donate to. You can reach out to us on social media at Communities of Hope RI or email us at communitydrivennews@gmail.com.
The Visual Arts Department is proud to present the artwork of seniors in intermediate and visual arts professional practices in a group exhibition entitled What Remains on December 11th from 4 to 6 p.m. What Remains is a collaborative exhibition that includes a range of media from painting to sculpture to metalwork. This exhibition focuses on life transitions and will be a unique experience in a 20-foot U-Haul truck parked right next to the Fine Arts Center, aka The Muffin. Come check us out. Again, the opening reception will be held on December 11th from 4 to 6 p.m. in front of The Muffin. There will be pizza provided.
Missed an episode of Hope Pod Live? All recorded episodes are now available on our YouTube at Communities of Hope RI and our website, communitydrivennews.org. Also, check us out on our Instagram at Communities of Hope RI, where you can find all the latest information on our upcoming shows, projects, and events.
Make sure to be at the GHH Atrium from 9 to 11 tonight for pop culture trivia hosted by Roger After Dark, WQRI, and Alternative Entertainment.
Additionally, tune in right here to 88.3 FM WQRI at 9 p.m. tonight for a live concert by the James Montgomery Band.
Next up on our docket of stories for the week, we have a new segment about Roger's first varsity hockey team and their game last Friday night. Reporters Brenna Medeiros, Jill Dorff, and myself went to the game and caught up with Coach Chris Hall and freshman center Jacob Ketwig afterwards about the results. Here is that story now. Last Friday, the Hawks took on the Suffolk University Rams at Driscoll Arena in Fall River. It was the team's first conference game of the season, so there was much anticipation for a Roger win. Puck drop was at 5 o'clock following pregame lineup announcements. The first 5 minutes of the game started with exciting back-and-forth possessions, but the scoring opened up when the Rams scored the first goal of the game on a power play at 6:57. The Hawks responded quickly with extended possessions and applied pressure to the opposition, tying the game 1-1 at 11:24. The tie, however, didn't last long as the Rams tallied another goal in the final minutes of the first period. The game, however, remained a close one through the second period as the Hawks' defense held strong against the Rams' aggressive offensive line. The close game didn't last much longer, though, as the Rams added on at 10:32 in the third period, making it 3-1. To cap off the scoring, the Rams added their fourth goal on yet another power play late in the game to make it a final score of 4-1. Following the game, freshman center Jacob Ketwig spoke with us about the loss. He said that they need to put this game behind them and be ready for the next one.
We can sweep this one under the rug. We can learn from our mistakes. And then it's a new day and a new challenge, a new opportunity to win.
Coach Chris Hall shared a similar message to the entire team in the locker room after the game. He said that they're right there, and each game they're making more progress. Even though there were 6 penalties against the Hawks throughout the game, there were 9 in the previous game. It's the price of having a primarily freshman team. They're young and exciting, but there are going to be mistakes and a learning curve. His hope is to take another step forward with each and every game and hopefully find their stride soon. The Hawks' next game was on Saturday, November 8th, where they fell to Nichols College with a final score of 7-1. Roger looks to snap the 2-game losing skid as they take on the University of New England in Biddeford, Maine, today, November 14th. Puck drop is at 7 p.m. Despite the loss, this was such a fun experience and something we can't wait to do again. Keep an eye out for more on this story on our website, communitydrivennews.org, and more coverage from the Hawks' next home game on Saturday, November 22nd.
Before we close out our show today, here is some more news. A new federal law expands healthcare access for incarcerated youth. Reporter Renuka Rayasam examined how a new federal law aims to connect incarcerated youth and young adults to Medicaid and children's health insurance program services before their release, making the first major policy change since 1965. The law, which took effect January 1st, 2025, requires states to provide medical and dental screenings as well as 30 days of continued case management to help young people reintegrate into their communities and society as a whole. Experts say the reform could reduce recidivism by addressing untreated mental health and substance use disorders that often lead youth back into the justice system. Yet implementing facilities and state health agencies, many of which lack systems to bill Medicaid or share medical records, advocates argue the effort represents an overdue investment in what one expert called a neglect part of the health system. For former youth like Valentino Valdez, whose untreated mental health struggles led to repeated incarceration, the law offers a plan towards stability and recovery. Supporters hope it will ensure future generations leave custody not just with paperwork, but with the health care they need to rebuild their lives. More of this at RhodeIslandCurrent.com.
States revisit juvenile justice as crime concerns rise. Reporter Amanda Watford highlights how lawmakers across the country are once again turning their attention to the juvenile justice system. During the most recent legislative sessions, at least 43 states and Washington, D.C., debated measures that could reshape how young people are held accountable, from expanding diversion and education programs to increased penalties for serious youth crimes. Advocates warn that through tough laws could be Advocates warn that tough laws could undo years of progress toward rehabilitation-focused reforms, while supporters say they're responding to public concerns about crime. In Maryland, a new law extends state oversight to children as young as 10 who are accused of serious offenses, while also creating a commission to review the state's juvenile services and investigate deaths under supervision. In Kansas, teens in detention will soon be able to attend outside vocational and educational programs through a new work release initiative, and lawmakers approved funds for a youth substance use treatment center. At the same time, states like Massachusetts and North Carolina are re-examining raise the age laws that determine when teens are tried as adults. Supporters say expanding juvenile jurisdiction could help more young people avoid lifelong barriers that come from adult convictions. But with renewed political focus on youth crime, the balance between accountability and rehabilitation remains a key question for policymakers nationwide. More of this at RhodeIslandCurrent.com.
Lawsuit challenges long waits, unsafe conditions at D.C. Youth Detention Center. Reporter Christian Flores details a growing legal battle over conditions inside D.C.'s Youth Services Center, where juveniles are reportedly waiting months to transfer to long-term rehabilitation programs. A new brief filed by the ACLU of D.C. and the Public Defender Service argues that overcrowding, violence, and lack of services have left young people warehoused in a short-term facility not designed for extended stays. According to court filings, the center now holds 117 juveniles in a space built for 98, with some teens waiting more than 3 months for placement. Advocates say those delays amount to, quote, dead time, otherwise days spent without education or treatment that D.C. law requires. The Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services acknowledges the backlog, but points to rising youth arrests and limited facility availability as reasons for the slowdown. Director Sam Abed told D.C. Council that the agency is working to reduce stay times and expand service capacity through overcrowding, though overcrowding continues to strain staff and safety. Meanwhile, reporters of violence and drug use at the center persist. A 7 News investigation earlier this year found that 14 fights in just 2 days and dozens of assault-related injuries each month. Advocates warn the crisis not only harms youth inside the facility, but undermines public safety when they return home without needed care. More of this at turnto10.com.
Maryland Commission urges end to automatically charging youth as adults. Reporter William J. Ford outlines new recommendations from Maryland's Commission on Juvenile Justice Reform, calling for an end to the state's practice of automatically charging minors as adults for certain crimes. The Commission's report says that the policy fails to improve public safety, disproportionately harms youth of color and could cost the state federal funding for violating juvenile justice standards. The group instead proposes that all cases start in juvenile court with judges deciding when adult prosecution is warranted, a model that mirrors national practices. Senator William C. Smith Jr. plans to reintroduce legislation next session to align Maryland law with Commission's recommendations. His earlier bill would have raised the minimum age for adult charges from 14 to 16 and expand eligibility for youth to remain in juvenile court. Data cited in the report shows that Maryland youth are being held in adult facilities for longer than federal law allows, sometimes up to 6 months, putting the state at risk of losing $350,000 in grant funding. Commission Chair Andre Davis, a retired federal judge, said the system must be, quote, led with both urgency and care, emphasizing that children in conflict with the law need support and healing, not punishment. Advocates and policymakers alike say that the recommendations signal a broader shift towards treating youth as youth and ensuring that justice systems reflect that principle. More of this at marylandmatters.org. You are listening to 88.3 FM WQRI, Roger Williams Student Radio in Bristol, Rhode Island, and this is our show for today. Tune back in every Friday from 12 to 2 p.m., and thank you very much for listening. I'm your host, Alex Tavalione.
And I'm your host, Alana Lamine. We also had our guest host, Matthew Downey, with us earlier. You can find our recordings on our website at communitydrivennews.org. Also, follow our social media at Communities of Hope and at HopePodLive_COH to stay up to date on all COH news. Stay tuned for Looking Good with Matt Madden from 3 to 4. Thank you for listening to WQRI 88.3.
Thank you to our partners and collaborators, Each Greenwich News, EcoRI News, Ocean State Stories from Salve Regina, Providence Eye, The Public's Radio, the Rhode Island PBS, Rhode Island Current, and Rhode Island News Today. This program was brought to you by Communities of Hope Civic Media.
Alexa Benson Amaranti,
Ashlyn Keating,
Addison Mason,
Anna Pellegrini,
Abigail Stark,
Brenna Medeiros,
Claire Kelly,
Joshua Gahegan,
Kylie Meadows,
Lugina Larry-Rawl,
Matthew Downey,
Michaela McDonald,
Naja Young,
Rachel Cabral,
Rebecca Scheffler,
RJ Rune,
Sarah Price,
Zara Atai.
All right, before we switch it off, I just want to make a quick little announcement that we will not be on air next week, November 21st, as we'll be taking a little break. We also won't be on air on the following week, November 28th, in observance of our Thanksgiving break. We hope you all have a great holiday and stay tuned for our next episode on December 5th. Have a great afternoon, everybody.